Donald Trump, Joe Biden, who is corrupt?
Mr. Reagan.
So I'm watching CNN this morning because I have to, for you. Anyway, I'm watching CNN and they're talking about the whistleblower thing, right? Everybody's speculating on what this whistleblower's concern was, right? The general consensus within the media is that during a phone call with the president of Ukraine, Donald Trump asked the president to investigate Joe Biden's dealings with that country. Specifically, there was an incident during the Obama administration when Joe Biden was vice president. Apparently, Joe Biden interfered with, I believe it was $8 billion in humanitarian aid. I think it was humanitarian aid. I'm not exactly sure what the money was supposed to be for, but there was $8 billion that was supposed to go to Ukraine from the United States government. I don't really know why we're giving Ukraine $8 billion, but anyway, that was apparently a thing. Joe Biden interjected himself into this deal, and he said, if you do not fire a particular prosecutor, a very specific person that was working in the government, if you don't fire him, we're not going to give you this $8 billion in aid, right? I mean, that's a fairly hostile negotiating tactic. I mean, that's pretty hardcore. He must have really wanted this prosecutor out of his office in the Ukraine.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Why Joe Biden was so obsessed with this one official in the Ukrainian government, we can only speculate. But it just so happens that Joe Biden's son was being investigated by that very prosecutor in Ukraine at that time. Now, that seems awfully suspicious. All right, before we get into that, I'm going to torture you yet again with an advertisement about silver coins. Any way you look at it, the 45th president of the United States has made a massive impact on the world stage in the 3 years he has been in office. He has bravely ventured into areas that presidents before him have shied away from. He's tackled Kim Jong-un on home territory. That's a first. He's taken on China in a trade war. That's a first. He recently offered to buy Greenland for the United States of America. That's a first. And not just overseas, here at home too. There have been several firsts. Draining the swamp, that's a first. Massive deregulation, first. And let's not forget the beautiful wall. That is a first. With their best-selling Trump 2020 Freedom .999 fine solid silver coin and United We Stand 10-ounce solid silver bullion bar together in one package at a special discounted price. And actually, let me show you this real quick. This is the Trump coin, which is very cool. I love this. Quite a nice little collector's item. And then this is the United We Stand 10-ounce. And 10 ounces is a good weight. It feels very cool. It's a cool thing to have. I love the American flag on the back. All right, so this is the most popular combo for this company, and you're getting 11 ounces of silver for an incredibly low price. It's the perfect combination for a perfect president. Go to Trump2020.com and use the code Mr. Reagan 25 and you'll save $25 on this incredible package. With the price of silver skyrocketing over the last 90 days, this is a can't miss offer. All right, we're back. Now let me talk to you a little bit more about Joe Biden. So now the speculation right now is that Donald Trump's phone call to this Ukrainian president, who, by the way, the new Ukrainian president is like an awesome guy, right? He was a former television comedian who was so tired of the corruption in Ukraine that he ran for president himself and won.
Volodymyr Zelensky, the comedian candidate joking at the ballot box, asking if he can cast more than one vote for the camera. Zelensky comes to the candidacy by way of a hit TV show called Servant of the People, where he plays an outsider elevated to the presidency.
And everybody in Ukraine right now is just loving this new Ukrainian president because he's such a cool guy, and he's really like a politician of the people. He seems to be genuinely trying to make the country better for the people of Ukraine and kind of get rid of some of this corruption. In fact, let's show a clip of this Ukrainian president from his days in comedy. So this is the guy. This is the guy that's the president of Ukraine. Cool guy. So when Trump is talking to this guy, to this Ukrainian president, I actually don't think it's completely unreasonable that Trump would say, hey, look, Joe Biden apparently committed a crime or did something a little bit shady here during his time as vice president. Can you look into it? I think it's perfectly reasonable to, if you suspect that an American citizen committed a crime or did something that is very suspicious, to ask somebody to look into it who has maybe better resources to investigate that than you do. Now, since this shady business happened with Ukraine or within the country of Ukraine, it's perfectly reasonable for Trump to ask assistance from Ukraine to help him investigate this particular issue. I mean, we do this all the time with different countries, right? If we feel like some murderer, for instance, goes to another country, we have something called an extradition law, right? So we won't send in our military to go get him, right, or our police to go get him. We'll ask the country to arrest him and send the murderer back to us, right? So we ask for cooperation with other governments all the time in dealing with crimes. I don't see how this is any different. But this is why I decided to make the video. Because whilst watching CNN, the CNN reporter kept characterizing this whole situation as a debunked conspiracy theory. Okay, so I'm not really sure why he refers to it as a conspiracy theory or why he thinks it's debunked, but then he had a fact checker come on so that he could interview this guy. And the fact checker went ahead and just corroborated everything that Fox News and all the conservative media outlets have been saying about this. He said that, in fact, yes, Joe Biden's son did work within Ukraine, and he was being investigated by this prosecutor, and Joe Biden did withhold this $8 billion in aid, demanding that this prosecutor be fired before Ukraine got the aid, right? And once the prosecutor was fired, the investigation into his son's activities or the business that his son was dealing with, that investigation went away.
President Trump is again insisting today that reporters should dig into a conspiracy theory involving Biden, Ukraine, and a Ukrainian prosecutor. What's the story and the facts as we know them?
Sure. So what we know for sure is that in 2016, Joe Biden, then the vice president, pushed Ukrainian leaders to get rid of a senior prosecutor. The Ukrainians eventually agreed after Biden threatened them to withhold $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees, and the parliament overwhelmingly voted to get rid of the prosecutor. Now, the reason there are some questions about this is that at the same time as Biden was making this push to oust the prosecutor, his son Hunter Biden was sitting on the board of directors of a Ukrainian natural gas company owned by someone who is theoretically under investigation by the prosecutor.
So he acknowledges, this fact checker comes on CNN, acknowledges all these things, but then the reason why they say this is a debunked conspiracy theory is because they refute the presumption that Joe Biden did this because of the investigation that was pending against his son. Their contention, which is what Joe Biden's contention is, their contention is that Joe Biden did this on principle because he thought that that particular prosecutor was corrupt. Maybe that's true. But you don't know that that's true, CNN. There's clear motivation here for him to have done this simply to protect his son. Even though that motivation is obvious, you're going to just dismiss that because you think Joe Biden is a good person and you think Trump is a bad person. So Joe Biden must be telling the truth and Trump and all the conservatives must just be, evil and horrible and they're just trying to get Joe Biden. I mean, it's It's insanity. The level of hypocrisy is maddening. Okay, so Donald Trump, no matter what he does, no matter how obvious it is that he's innocent of any charge that you level against him, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how innocent he is, you're going to assume that Trump is guilty. On the other hand, it doesn't matter how clear the evidence is against any Democrat, they're innocent because they're a good person. They're on the left. The degree to which CNN is able to indulge their bias is actually quite shocking. I mean, despite the fact that I think that CNN lost its credibility a long time ago, I'm always still astonished by how willing they are to indulge their biases, and not in like a little way, full on indulge their biases, like extremely so, right? Like castigate the president for things that he didn't do, total speculation, stuff they have no evidence on, and completely exonerate somebody like Joe Biden for something about which there is an obvious motive, and he's actually talked about what he did. This is not a conspiracy theory. Joe Biden has talked about having withheld that money in order to get that prosecutor fired. He's talked about this. He's admitted to it. So this is not a conspiracy theory. This is what happened. And look, maybe CNN is right. Maybe this guy was a corrupt political figure. An investigation into the events around what happened there with that $8 billion in aid, the investigation that Trump is suspected to be trying to conduct here, that investigation, that will only be discovered by such an investigation. And so the left shouldn't have really a problem with this, but they're saying things like, "Oh, this is an abuse of power. This is clear evidence of Donald Trump's corruption."
Trump deserves to be investigated, and he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me.
Let me ask you a question, left, CNN, MSNBC, you guys. If Donald Trump were, say, running for office, and one of his political opponents tried to investigate him for a crime, right? Would that be an abuse of power? Would that be an abuse of power? Because you guys were totally doing that throughout his candidacy. Now suddenly that Trump is like, "Oh, we should investigate Joe Biden for this crime." Oh my, this is an abuse of power. This is just all political. Now, what if Joe Biden really did commit this crime? What if Joe Biden committed a worse crime? What if Joe Biden committed murder? Is Donald Trump not allowed to request an investigation about a murder? I mean, what crimes are off limits here? At what point does it stop becoming an abuse of power and start becoming reasonable for Donald Trump to inquire about potential criminal activity about an American citizen? Okay, if Joe Biden really did commit a crime here, or he did something that was untoward for his position, in his position as a vice president, I think that we have a right to know about that as American citizens. I mean, are all candidates for president now immune to jurisprudence? All right, let me back up for a second. The reason that the left thinks this is so terrible that maybe Trump asked the Ukrainian president to investigate the Biden situation, which I don't know if that's actually what the whistleblower said happened, but that's what everybody thinks happened. So the reason they think this is a problem is because they suspect that this would be considered like an abuse of power. Right? So in a dictatorship, for instance, if you have an opposing political view, it's fairly common for the dictator to have you executed, right? Or have you imprisoned or silenced in some way. Sometimes these prosecutions of political dissidents or political enemies is based on a sham accusation, right? So they are framed for something, they're accused of something that they clearly didn't do, or there's some obscure law that's used to arrest them, and they're imprisoned or they're executed, and really they didn't do anything wrong, they just had a differing political view, or they challenged the dictator. This is known to have happened in the USSR, this is known to have happened in a lot of communist countries, third world dictatorships, Africa, these kinds of places. So we tend to associate this kind of abuse of power where you would say, use your position as president to oppress a political opponent. We consider this to be horrifically unethical. Not just unethical, but something that is extremely dangerous to the freedom of Western-style democracy. So that's what they're basically trying to say. They're basically trying to say that Donald Trump is using his position as president to oppress a political opponent. But here's the thing. Investigating a political opponent isn't actually corruption if the political opponent actually did the crime that you're investigating him for, okay? And it looks like what Joe Biden did was, in fact, as sinister as we on the right suspect that it was. Now, again, maybe it wasn't, but there was a clear motivation for such an action, and such an action was taken. Now, I'm sure we give aid to hundreds of countries around the world all the time who have various corrupt officials within the government. I don't know of any other instance. I've never heard in the news ever of another instance in which anyone in political office, a president, a vice president, an ambassador, I've never heard of any kind of an official ever presenting another country with an ultimatum like this. You fire a specific person within your government or we're not going to give you financial aid. When has that ever happened? I'd love for them to look into the history of this. Anybody to look into the history of this. One of the people who watch my channel, maybe. You guys are excellent at doing this sort of research. Dick Jackman, get on that, right? How many times has this happened in the history of the country where we have withheld aid because a country didn't fire an official that we felt was corrupt? I don't think that's ever happened ever. And it just so happens that this particular prosecutor, this prosecutor in Ukraine, just happened to be investigating Joe Biden's son. And Joe Biden levies this very specific ultimatum. We will not give you your $8 billion in financial aid unless you fire this specific guy who's investigating my son. Oh, no, there's no possible way that was Joe Biden protecting his son. No. This is the most ridiculous supposition that CNN or MSNBC could possibly have about this particular incident. But they have this supposition because they like Joe Biden and they hate Donald Trump and they want to make their viewers believe that Donald Trump is corrupt and Joe Biden is a pure good person. I mean, it's just another way for them to attack Trump. Now, Joe Biden's come out and said, oh, Trump's so corrupt. But I think behind the scenes, Joe Biden is terrified right now. If what he did was corrupt and we figure that out and that all becomes discovered, I think he's pretty much screwed, because not only do I think that the American public would probably, hopefully not vote him, give him the nomination, for the Democrats, but I think it could possibly lead to him going to jail. I think he could potentially go to prison for that. I suspect. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't actually know the details of that kind of abuse of power, because that really is an abuse of power if that's exactly what Joe Biden did, which is what it sounds like. Anyway, so I just wanted to give you my 2 cents on this and really clarify what I think's been going on here, clarify my thoughts about why I think the left is completely wrong on this and acting, I think, super desperate and super crazy about this specific situation. I know I've been a little bit sparse with my videos lately, but I have a big thing coming up, I think probably at the end of next month. So hopefully I can get that out. I've been working hard on that. So my channel's going to get a lot better real soon. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. Good night.
Коханці, засланці, всі гляньте, тьфу на них, артисти, стилісти, геть з міста, ще дай помади, гей паради, а в раді всі такі, я хочу, не можу, за сало. Ну давай, ось моя булава, браття мої, завтра йдемо танцювати проти москалів. Затанцюємо, пак, сила у нас є, ще не вмерла Україна, поки сало є. Борщ, сало, цибуля, хрін, сивуха, брага, п'ю. Я пью,